Okay, so you've got to watch this. So Francesca Albanese, if you're not familiar with her, she is an Italian lawyer, an academic who was appointed recently by the United Nations to be some kind of special envoy, rapporteur, I think the term is, into the Palestine, the occupied Palestinian territories, as they refer to it. And she has been leading the charge against Israel as Israel fights its just war and wars, really, because it's on multiple fronts, for survival. And particularly as Israel has justly and rightly gone after Hamas, and she's made it her focus to do everything she can to demonize and victimize Israel, basically, in this process, despite the fact that Israel has shown more surgical precision in getting rid of Hamas than any army has in the history of modern urban warfare, according to UN statistics, by the way. But anyway, Francesca has been accused, because of her demonization of Israel, double standards, she's been accused of anti-Semitism. And she just seems to be completely unaware of the demonization and double standards that she holds in her heart. And this is an interview that UN Watch actually just put out, without any commentary or anything, just because they think this, it just really exposes her in this interview. And I want to show you it. So here we go. The very first question she's actually asked is, are you an anti-Semite? Have a watch.
Francesca Albanese, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Are you an anti-Semite?
I have to be honest, I will answer your question, fine. But I'm really bothered because with all what's happening and with all the effort that it takes to stay sane in the middle of this madness, as a human being, as a mother, as a lawyer, this is not the way I would like to start an interview with you, but I will. So first of all, yes, this is one of the accusations that has been leveled against me, against my mandate and my persona. But I would like to go with you through who is accusing me, what I'm accused of, and why. So, the State of Israel has accused this mandate of supporting terrorism, justifying terrorism, and crimes against Israelis, and anti-Semitism for decades. It started with Richard Falk, who's an American Jew himself, and he was accused to be a self-hating Jew. The cancel culture that is promoted by Israel, its sycophants and like the squads of minions and barking dogs everywhere. There is a network that protects Israel. I'm assessing Israel's performance under international law, and I'm commenting and condemning Israeli human rights record.
Okay, so let's just be clear. She's saying I'm just focusing on what Israel's doing and looking at it in an objective way. Notice how, by the way, she doesn't just say, no, of course I'm not an anti-Semite. She doesn't actually just say that. I don't understand why she can't just say that. But you're going to see now, as this interview progresses, that the interviewer exposes her anti-Semitism that clearly she seems to be completely unaware of. Anyway, let's keep watching.
So I conclude what I conclude, and my conclusions wouldn't change if Israel was ruled by Buddhists, Muslim, Christians. It wouldn't change. And this is a deflection tactic that, in order to move the attention away from the violations that Israel commits. And by the way, many Jewish scholars, also Holocaust scholars, have stood and Jewish organizations have stood in my defense and pushed back on this. I'm done.
Let's get into the details.
Many. Yeah, what she's referring to are the fringe of the fringes of the Jewish community. The vast majority of the Jewish community stands resolutely behind Israel. And you're always going to get in any camp some people who are self-haters, who have perverse views on things. She is not acknowledging what the vast majority of Jewish people feel. But anyway, now the interview is going to get into examples that show that far from what she wants to say, that she's just looking at things objectively. She very much isn't.
Details of the criticism, Ms. Albanese. Last summer, you endorsed a tweet comparing Benjamin Netanyahu to Hitler. Why did you do that?
No. The tweet was about something else. The tweet
there was a picture of Hitler with a picture of Netanyahu, and you wrote under that tweet, "This is exactly what I was thinking."
I compared the cheering crowd that received Netanyahu. At the time, there were already an investigation for crimes, international crimes against him. The ICC prosecutor had requested an arrest warrant against him. He was received by a standing ovation by the US Congress.
Okay, so just to be clear, you didn't condone the comparison between Netanyahu and Hitler, just the fact that he received a warm welcome in the US Congress?
No, because the tweet was about the cheering crowd. Craig Mohaiber, who's a former
I just want
UN
to be clear
official.
on this point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so...
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll lay that dead.
And I will soften the moment we get out of this, because I would really like to talk about the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory.
Of course, we're getting to that. We're coming to that.
So what a completely ridiculous answer. She's saying, oh no, I'm just comparing the fact that they had cheering crowds. Obviously, you're making a comparison between Netanyahu and Hitler. And for those at the back who don't necessarily understand why that's anti-Semitism, and why she clearly doesn't seem to think it's anti-Semitism, let's just make this absolutely clear. You know, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance created a definition of anti-Semitism, which has been acknowledged by many, many, many Western governments and institutions and organizations, where they say that comparisons to the Nazis, when you compare Israel to the Nazis, that is a form of anti-Semitism. Why? The fact that this even needs to be spelled out is so ridiculous. The Nazi project was to destroy, get rid of, annihilate the Jewish people. Israel was created to re-establish Jewish sovereignty, the Jewish people's sovereignty in their ancient homeland, which had been taken away from them. It'd be a 2,000-year-old injustice. And they re-established that. And she has faced a lot of backlash from that, for people who wish the Jews dead, who don't want to see the Jewish people restore sovereignty to correct an injustice. And when Israel fights against those who wish a modern genocide on them, to call her, and you may not like the way she goes about a war, but it is war, it is not genocide. To say that in protecting her own people, in fighting for her own survival, she is doing what was done to her, that is such a perversion, such a ridiculous claim, that you can only look at it as basically saying you are trying to undermine their very right to exist. Because if you're saying when they go against Hamas and other modern day Nazis that they are somehow the Nazis now, then when by the way, you certainly don't compare other countries that fight wars in far less humane ways. You don't compare them to Hitler, but when it's the Jews doing it, you do. The only conclusion you can come to is that you are seeking to undermine Israel's very right to exist and live, and thus the Jewish people's very right to that. Let's continue.
So your opponents also say that
Sorry, Ahmad, just to be clear, anti-Semitism is discrimination against the Jewish people as Jews. Even if I had compared Netanyahu, I've not compared Netanyahu to Hitler.
Okay.
But even if I don't think that it's anti-Semitic, it might be inopportune, it might lack diplomacy. Take whatever you like.
Albanese,
she's so unaware. Who else has she compared to Hitler? Why is it only the leader of the Jewish state?
Most of your opponents would say that's the very definition of anti-Semitism, that you draw comparisons between Nazi Germany and today's Israel.
And why is it? Can you explain to me why is it anti-Semitic?
Well, I just did, but sorry, I'm not there.
Me who's making the claim, but most of the Jewish interest groups say that's the definition of anti-Semitism. You do not draw parallels between the Nazis and today's Israeli leadership.
I'm curious, by the way, does she call Hamas Nazis? Does she call the desire to kill every single Israeli male, man, woman and child, and Jewish man, woman and child, has she referred to them as Nazis, as modern day Nazis? Because that comparison is utterly clear and utterly fair. Don't think she has.
You know, you can make up your own definition. First of all, I didn't compare a Nazi leader with the genocidaire, with the architect of the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay, fine. Then we move on.
I didn't.
Fine.
That accusation, by the way, of genociding the Palestinians is also an anti-Semitic, ridiculous accusation. The Palestinian population has increased in the last year. I'm saying even with all the deaths in the war. So, you know, there's zero evidence. You talk about starvation as a form of genocide. The Palestinians, certainly the Hamas fighters, some of them look rather plump. It's not the Palestinians that have been starving, it's the hostages that are completely emaciated. It's amazing. Every accusation, it is the opposite, and they are what they accuse Israel of.
And I didn't.
Okay.
And at the same time, there are people who have done it, including Jewish people, and I wouldn't go as far as saying that they are anti-Semitic, because have they discriminated against the Jewish people because they are Jews? No. Again, it refers to the performance of... I mean, we have to stop being so sensitive and considering everything that has to do with Israel untouchable.
They love saying this, by the way, people are anti-Semitic. They say, we're so sensitive. You say anything against the Jews, anything against Israel, and somehow you're terrible. No, it's not anything. Israel is a country that is full of self-criticism. It's such a straw man. But it's when you compare us to Nazis, that's when we're going to have an objection. Sorry that we object to that. It's ridiculous.
Come on.
Okay, let's move on to the other criticism. You also attacked for rarely criticizing or condemning atrocities committed by Palestinian militant groups like Hamas. Your response to that?
That's absolutely not true. I've condemned the crimes committed against Israeli civilians on October 7 immediately and unconditionally. I've written a book about that starts with a condemnation.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the book's all about condemning Hamas, I'm sure.
Of Hamas crimes on October 7 against Israeli civilians. I've engaged with, including with the families of Israeli hostages and with others, and this is crystal clear.
Moving on to the contentious relationship between Israel and the UN as a whole.
And let's not forget she works for the UN, by the way. So this is where it just goes from the ridiculous to the absurd.
As long as so many of you are Jew-hating, you don't really care that the Palestinians are not peace-loving. Shame on you.
According to Israel and its supporters, you personify everything that's wrong with the UN, that your organization is totally biased. Does the UN treat Israel unfairly?
Well, look, I think that I would agree that on occasions that UN displays some bias. For example, I think Israel claims to be singled out in the United Nations because of the many resolutions at the General Assembly level and Human Rights Council level. But this is a consequence and a dysfunction, if you want, of the lack of effectiveness of the Security Council when it comes to Palestine and Israel-Palestine. And so because the Security Council has often been paralyzed by the US veto, then you have these more democratic instances where there is no veto, like the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly.
Last year in the UN General Assembly,
to answer your question.
This context is important. Last year, the UN General Assembly, with 193 member states, condemned Israel 17 times, according to the pro-Israel monitoring group UN Watch. Countries like North Korea, Iran, Syria, Myanmar, Russia, and the US were slammed with one resolution each. 17 resolutions against Israel, 6 against the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
That doesn't sound fair.
Depends on what you mean fair. The overproduction of resolution.
Depends on what you mean fair. Okay, I would like to see how she gets out of this one.
And I have to say two things. The first is the overproduction of resolutions is due to the fact that nothing changes.
Oh, so everything changes in all those other countries. Yes, everything's so much improving in all those other despotic countries, but Israel, nothing changes. It's just unbelievable. I love her fumbling here.
Nothing changes on the ground, and frankly, I agree with you. I mean, to an extent, probably I would agree with Israel. What's the purpose of continuing to pass resolutions while nothing changes on the ground? There is never enforcement of international law when it comes to Israel.
Oh, but there is when it comes to North Korea and China and all these other countries. Unbelievable.
And again, I speak of Israel because this is the mandate that the United Nations have given me, and I'm trying to...
Yeah, but they're talking about the fact that it's not just you, it's on the floor, the resolutions every day. The obsession is with Israel. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm just doing my job. What about the UN, the organization that you represent as a whole?
Deliver it in the most impartial and objective way. It's a brutal, very difficult time.
Okay, it's just utterly unbelievable. And, you know, I think one of the things that is she's not really appreciating is that I suspect actually she probably doesn't herself consider herself to be anti-Semitic. She probably doesn't. But what's going on here? She doesn't actually understand what anti-Semitism is. There's a complete cognitive dissonance. Because what you need to understand, and what she doesn't understand, is that anti-Semitism it's a story. Okay, and the story is that the Jew is the demon and the villain. And a person that's infected by anti-Semitism, they will judge the Jewish people collectively at a radically different standard to everyone else, where things that are normal among other people and other nations become crimes when the Jews do it. And the standards that Jews are judged by is that, you know, if someone is upset, then no, you did something wrong. Not let's look into it, let's investigate it, but you've done something wrong. She's deep in this. She's deep in this, and it's obvious to everyone watching, but it's not obvious to her. And it's amazing that sometimes actually all you need to do is just let people speak themselves, and they reveal their own biases and prejudices for all to see. Thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.